Ancestry.com is, according to their numbers, and this has probably been independently verified, the largest online genealogy database in the world, with access to approximately 12.7 billion records. It's amazing considering they started like 20 years ago or so. These records come from partnerships with libraries, archives, churches, historical societies, and other organizations. Ancestry is also home to more than 20 million user or member-generated family trees, which can be browsed for free by anyone, whether they have a registered account or not. So you don't have to have a paid-up subscription to create a user family tree on Ancestry. And I'm going to show you mine in a minute. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the user family trees because we could do a whole class just on those. And plus, a lot of people, they don't use much more than the user family trees sometimes. And there's a lot more to Ancestry than just those member family trees. So the home edition versus the library edition. Anybody got a home subscription? Okay, 2 or 3 people. The main page for Ancestry's library edition has a different look and different resources than the main page of the subscription home edition. Most notably with the library edition, you don't have access to the personal family tree feature or the private messages that you get with a home subscription. While you can search member family trees on the home version or the library version, you can't create your own account. However, you can create a free personal account with Ancestry and then transfer any information you find on the library edition to your free account on the home edition. So I've got us, is everybody on the library website? What we want to do is click at the top. You see where my mouse is, the cursor on local history. Double click that. And my computer is slow, so you may get there before I do. Finally. So then you should see a slider underneath it that says Ancestry between newspapers.com and Fold 3. Click on that, and that will take you to the Ancestry homepage. And I wanted to talk about some of the main features.
Excuse me, what did you say click on?
Click on the little sliding bar and click on Ancestry. Double click it.
Ancestry Library Edition. That's what
And it should bring you to the screen that's on the big screen. It should be the Ancestry homepage.
I know it. I don't like how it scrolls.
Ancestry Library Edition?
Yes, it should look like what's on the screen, on the big screen.
Okay, got it.
Is everybody there? Okay.
And it'll take just. It looks like we're all there.
Yeah, my computer's probably slower than these laptops, which is not surprising. Well, at the top, if you can see the cursor, this is your navigation bar. And you can see it has various different sort of categories: home, search, message boards, learning center, charts and forms, new collections. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those as we go along. If you wanted to, what you could do is just drop straight into doing your research out here by the side, U.S. Census records. I'm going to click on 1940, and it brings up a search box for the 1940 census, which is one way, if you are beginning, start with your parents, as we said last week, and work back a generation at a time. So maybe find parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents that would have been alive in the 1940 census, and you can start there going backwards a generation at a time. Or you can just click on, well, first off, as you'll see, it has other boxes on the screen like search census, search vital records, search military record, search immigration record. You can zero in on specific types of records, either one of these that you wanted to look for, and you could search them by clicking on these boxes. Well, and at the bottom, you will notice that it has quick links. And some of this is redundant. Some of these you can get to the same pages by clicking multiple different icons on the screen. I think they do that to make it as user-friendly as they can, so people like me just have to try really hard to screw it up. And you can see they've got public member family trees, birth, marriage, and death records, military, tax, criminal, land, and wills. And we'll look at a few of those as we go along. So that's if you have an idea of what kind of record you want to search for, then you can search directly for that kind of record. If you don't, let me see if you're not sure exactly what kind of record there are records there are on an ancestor, and you just want to dive in, you can click Begin Searching, which we'll do again in a minute. But that's what that will look like. And that will search all of Ancestry's databases for any records based on the criteria that you type in the search box.
So where did you click on Begin Search?
Where it says Begin Searching, the big green box under the
I see. Okay.
library.
Gotcha.
So click on Begin Searching, and that searches all of Ancestry's gazillion databases based on the search parameters that you put into it. But going back to the navigation bar, and this is on page 4 of your handout, the navigation bar at the top of the screen. Home, clicking on this icon from any other page brings you back to the Ancestry home page. So if I go to, for example, message boards, and say I've searched the message boards, if I want to go back home, I could hit my back button and go arrow, arrow back, or I could just click home and it automatically takes me back to the home page. So that's kind of a shortcut. Then under the search, clicking search opens a drop-down list of links to different search forms. So let's do that. All categories is the basic search form. However, you can also select from the following: census and voter registration lists, and you guys see where I am at the top of the bar. Search, just click on that and it opens that drop down. You can select from the following: census and voter lists, birth, marriage and death, military, immigration and travel. So again, it's kind of redundant because you got the same kind of information that you can search at the bottom of the screen. The message boards are where you can basically post messages to other people doing any kind of research, whether it's on your own family or somebody else's family. It's got different countries that you may be researching from, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, Western Europe. Then surnames are indexed, so if I was looking for Bratcher, I could click on B, and then you got to sort of scroll down to the BRs. So I'm not going to actually do that, but basically it's like message forums where you can swap information with people researching the same ancestors. I don't really use that a whole lot because no one seems to ever be researching the same people that I am, or at least they're not posting any messages. But then back to the the navigation bar, the Learning Center offers access to Ancestry research aids, tips, and tricks, as well as information from informational material from Ancestry experts. So these are little documents, 2 or 3 page documents, like for example, getting started. Ancestry ends 10 research tips, top 10 research tips. So if you need a little bit of help, or maybe you've got a question, these little articles might answer those questions. And they've got them on various different topics and categories. Census, beyond the basics, getting started. You can scroll down, military, immigration, ethnic records, and they're just, they give you helpful hints on getting the most out of your Ancestry experience and finding the records that you're looking for. So then, charts and forms is where you can download different kinds of ancestral or descendancy charts, which are the blank standard genealogy forms, which, as we were talking about earlier, if you get a family, not FamilySearch, but Family Tree Maker subscription, Family Tree Maker will organize your data into these various different kinds of charts. But if you want to try to go old school and write them out by hand, which sometimes it's good to do that before you even start researching on Ancestry, to fill out a basic genealogy chart in pencil with as much information as you know or can surmise, and then start looking for that information. But it has different kinds, like it has a research calendar where you can document all the different records and research that you've conducted to try to find, say, a marriage license or military service records. So, and I know a couple of genealogists that really like to keep a research log. If you do this, you'll say, well, I've already checked the National Archives for my grandfather's World War I service records, and they got burned up in that fire, so I know not to check that again. Or I've already checked Fold 3 for his military pension application file, and I can't find it. So I know that's not on Fold 3, so you don't duplicate your research. So there are various different kinds of charts, family group sheets for each different family that had kids, and then the final category on the navigation bar, in the navigation bar, is new collections. And this basically takes you to the card catalog, which we'll see again in a minute. But it's a card catalog list containing the newest and most recent record collections that they've added to Ancestry. And as you can see, it's not really alphabetized. I think they've got it up by when it was posted, maybe, but it's not alphabetized. But you can search according to title or keyword. So if you're looking for something, sometimes you may have to keep typing till you get the precise keyword. Now let's go to, if you want to do a basic search, you can just click Begin Searching, the green box in the middle. This form can be accessed either by clicking on the green Begin Searching icon, or you can go to the home page and click Search. Go to the navigation, takes you to the same place. So again, some of that redundancy built in. And again, this searches all of Ancestry's database. The pros are this searches all of Ancestry's records, or 90% of Ancestry's records, and is probably the best way to begin new research. It's easy to locate basic records quickly this way. The cons are that searches for common names often are meaningless and ineffective, and the sheer number of actual records can be overwhelming. But I'm going to see what comes up for my third great-grandmother, Mary Freeman. So I'm typing her last name in the last name box, her first name in the first and middle names box, and then I think on the handouts I looked for her in Franklin County, because I'm starting to think they were probably in Franklin County for a few years. I happen to know her birth date is 1805. And that's all I'm going to type in there for right now. Now, if you click on this Show More Options, you can give it more detailed information. But if you remember one thing from this session about Ancestry, probably FamilySearch too, but definitely Ancestry, less is more. The more information you give the machine, the more it's going to blow its mind. So you just basically want to go with, if you know the first and last name, the county and state, and then if you know the birth year, start with that. And you'll notice that it has boxes under each one of these boxes here, search boxes. it says exact and they're not checked. Well, that especially for the names, leaving them unchecked allows Ancestry to check for spelling variations, which if you remember from last week, spelling variations are very prominent. These clerks and census takers are definitely hooked on phonics and hard of hearing. So they may get the name misspelled, they may leave out, and probably will leave out the middle initial or the middle name. They almost never do that, give you the middle initial or middle name. They may get the age off, plus or minus 5 years, depending on who answered their question. So leaving it unfiltered like this allows you to get the most bang for your buck, and it will check a lot more. It's got a lot more to check for. So as you can see, let me see what happens if I just check these boxes and see what we get as opposed to not checking the boxes. So this is telling it exact matches to each of these. And you can see I get 2 hits that meet those exact criteria. Exactly the ones I would expect to show up, by the way. So both of those are my third great grandmother from 1850 and 1860. But I'm going to uncheck that. So that would have helped me out in this case. If I had left it checked exactly, I would have gotten 2 records, which I happen to already have. They're census records, but I'm going to uncheck the boxes, and you'll see that we will probably get a lot more hits. Yeah, see, we're already getting a lot more hits in the sidebar, which you can scroll down. And this is page 1 of 4,142 pages. So you probably don't want to go through all 4,000 pages of this. So it will pretty much rank them, the ones that it thinks more closely fit your search criteria, it will put near the top, as it indeed has done with this 1860 census. It won't put them in chronological order, but so there's Mary in her 1860 federal census enumeration. And then if I go back, hit the back bar, and click on 1850, it takes me to her 1850. So, since I'm here, I'll say a little bit about this screen. This is where the Ancestry abstractors have transcribers have transcribed data from the census document, in this case, onto this page. And a lot of people print this page out and then stop here, but this is not the census page. For one thing, this information could be wrong because, as we've already talked about, the Ancestry character recognition software cannot always read the antiquated handwriting. The abstractor or transcriber that transcribed this might have just made a mistake and written an S when he meant to put a T down, and they don't have all the information from this census transcribed yet. So what you always want to do is click on the image next to, you can print this page out as sort of documentation that it came from Ancestry, which is what I like to do. But you always want to click on the actual image. And then this is the image that you always want to get a copy of, the original image of whatever it is. And this is Mary Freeman's 1850 Lauderdale County, Alabama census enumeration. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but she's living with a man that I believe was her 18-year-old son, William Freeman, who vanishes after this census. His 14-year-old wife, Sarah C. Freeman, who the census enumerator says this couple has been married within the census year. And then they're living with the woman I believe is William's mother, Mary Freeman. William's 3-year-old brother, Wiley, is not in this census, and I have no idea where he was. He could have been in the house and just got not counted. He might have gotten skipped. He could have been living with relatives. It's theoretically possible that Mary Freeman was not William's mother, that she was a grandmother and Wiley was with his parents, wherever they were. But he's not.
Can you scroll up and see like what the categories are?
Yeah, and we can actually zoom in.
Yeah.
So,
Occupation.
yeah, and you can print out the blank forms from the forms and charts page, and it'll basically have blank versions of these. But in the first blank, the dwelling house numbered in the order of visitation. So they number the houses, the census takers number the houses from 1 to 500 or whatever in the order they come to them, not in any kind of geographical. Well, they go by their enumeration district. But then within their enumeration district, they break it down, they number the families, or they number the houses as they come to the houses. And they number the families as they come to the families, because if you stop and think a minute, there could be 2 or more families living in one house. So a lot of cases, families shared living space, so they will number the families and the houses, which if you'll notice for number 85 and 86, Nathan Neighbors, he's dwelling number 85 and house number 86. They've had 85 families ahead of him, and then 85 houses ahead of him, and 86 families ahead of him. Then number 2 is families living in the same, and this this is supposed to be people living in that house the day the census man showed up. Now, there may be a family that lives here every other day, but they're not here today, but they get counted anyway because they said, well, my brother-in-law lives with us, but he's at work today and he's not home. They're not supposed to write him down because he's technically not living there when the census man shows up. But they're supposed to write down who's in that family when the census guy shows up. They may make a note that other families live here, but if the family they're trying to interview is at home, they may ask neighbors. So, again, you have different levels for error to creep up. In the third box on line up, you have the name of every person whose usual place of abode. So it is every person whose usual place of abode is in this family. So forget what I just said. Even if they're not here, if they live in this family, they're still supposed to be counted. So, but they may or may not for whatever reason. So this blank is usually the head of the family, which usually is the father, or in some cases it might be a widowed mother. So if they have numbers next to the name, that's a new house and a new family. If they have new household numbers but no new family numbers, it's a different family living in the same house. A lot of times the Ancestry software and abstractors will get these confused. They'll combine 2 and sometimes 3 different families together. So you have to pay attention to these numbers. In some cases, the actual census takers in 1850 got them confused. But then you can see they've got blanks for boxes for sex, or age, sex, their color, which for 90% of the people at this time would be white. If they're free people of color, meaning African Americans who are not enslaved, they'd have a B or a mulatto, for an M for mulatto in that box. But by 1850, there's just like 15 free people of color living in Lauderdale County, and most of those are in the city limits of Florence. So then they have a box for anyone in the family who's working. They have a box for their occupation, then the birthplace of that father, then if a couple has been married within that census year, between the dates of the census, and then if they've attended school within that year, and then if they cannot read or write, which you'll notice a lot of people have those boxes checked. And then, as we said last week, in the getting started, when we looked at census records, as they go forward, they started asking for a lot more information as they went along in the different census years. But if I want to tweak and you'll see here now that I'm on this page right here, this results page, I can filter if I've gotten those results, but I want to narrow that down to just census and voter lists. I could click on that. If I wanted to restrict it to just military records, and it's 4,000 pages, so that it would only show me those, I could do that. If I want to keep it to North America, then I could do that, which in my case for Mary would probably be a good idea because she was born and raised in the United States. But if I wanted to tweak it and revise my search, and if you can see the little pen at the top next to the 3 dots, if you can see where I've got the cursor, you can click on that, and then I can revise the search. So if I wanted to say take out Mary and put in Wiley Freeman, my second great grandfather, who I believe was Mary's son, and I got to get rid of the date. I could leave that in there, but I probably shouldn't. And then I'm going to check that for Lauderdale County because I know he was always ever in Lauderdale County. And with Freeman, they usually 90% of the time they get it right, M-A-N. I've never seen it misspelled yet. There's always a first time. But I am going to leave Wiley unchecked because I know how Wiley spelled his name, but the census takers could spell it 3 or 4 different ways. So if I click on Wiley Freeman, it brings me more stuff. Brings me results specifically tailored for Wiley Francis Freeman, which I didn't put his middle name in there. If I had, it would bring me stuff that shows his middle name. But this Wiley Earl Freeman is one of his sons who was born in 1898, or I'm sorry, his grandsons. So this is where somebody has done a Freeman family chart, a Freeman family member genealogy that has Wiley Earl Freeman on there. So I don't know this person. So that is Wiley's grandson, Wiley Earl. But if I click on this down here, 1880, this will bring me to the 1880 federal census for Wiley Freeman. And again, they have transcribed it, most of it. They don't have all the documentation transcribed. So I can always look at this and get a fairly good idea whether this is the guy I want to look at or not, and it is. So again, you always want to click on. And then it has in the toolbar over here, and I've got this itemized in your handout. You probably all know how to do this, but just in case, I got pretty specific with you can email documents directly to your email account, or you can save them to a thumb drive. Like if you're in local history or genealogy and you want to save these to a flash drive, you can save them to a flash drive and print them out at home so you don't have to spend the 20 cents a sheet. You can email them to yourself at home automatically and save a step, or you can print them out as you go. And you can do that in the sidebar. In the toolbar over here, if you want to make it bigger so you can read it, you can click on the plus and minus and make it bigger. And it really helps because sometimes the print is kind of small. And these are the digitally enhanced images for 1880. If you compare these to the microfilm is awful. Ancestry has cleaned these up as much as they could. With some of these 1880 images, there was nothing they could do. For whatever reason, the images on FamilySearch for 1880 are a little bit clearer and more easily viewed.
So is the email option on that toolbar?
Yeah, it's on the sidebar under the tool icon, and I've got that. I should have that listed in your handout. So one thing I wanted to briefly talk about too while we're here, I'm going to go back to the search feature in the navigation bar and double click it if it'll get there. Now, Ancestry is really good for federal records, like records generated on a federal level, which would be federal census records, military service records, any kind of records generated by or on behalf of the federal government or a branch of the federal government, because these records are more easily made available from the federal government to Ancestry. However, Ancestry does have several databases of United States collections of records. So if you click on search and notice this map with all these little blue bubbles, if you go to the one for Alabama, it shows 163 collections. You can click on that little bubble or click on Alabama, either one, and it brings up a sidebar that will show you a list of all of their Alabama record collections that are specifically from Alabama, like U.S. World War II draft registration cards of young men from 1940 to 47. They've got an index to the death indexes for Alabama. They've got reconstructed censuses. They've got a death index, and a lot of these are just indexes to other records because the licensing agreements with the state, they can't actually offer the records yet, but they will have indexes to them. So I think one of the things Jordan will talk about, at least I hope on FamilySearch, is if you're in an LDS affiliate library, which FLPL happens to be, you can download actual Alabama death certificates from FamilySearch, whereas Ancestry, you can only see the index, which is better than nothing, but it's not as good as being able to actually download the entire document. So FamilySearch allows you to do that. Then, if, for example, we wanted to click on Alabama U.S. state censuses, Alabama took a variety of several different years worth of state censuses between like 1825 and 1866. As far as I know, only 2 of them still exist. Part of 1855 and 1866. And you can search those here. Now, some states like New York did a state census every 5 or 10 years. So the federal census comes out every 10 years. New York did a state census every 5 years. Because these 1855 and 1866 state censuses only index heads of families. So they're the only people that get listed by name are heads of families. And I know she was in Lauderdale County. And if you don't have county spelled right, Ancestry will tell you. It can be really annoying. And then you can type in any event, but I'm going to go down here to census year, and since I happen to know already that there was an 1866 census, and I'm going to select that for exact matches, and it should, yes, bring me to Mary Freeman's 1866 Alabama State Census Enumeration, which the index page, and then these you sort of have to enlarge them. So here she is on this line right here. And when you print these out, if you download them and open them in the Windows viewer, you can crop them. So you don't have to print out 2 pages. It'll print out 1 page more enlarged. So that is that you get to through search and then click on Alabama. Now, there was something else I wanted to do under card catalog. So we're going to go to the search in the icon, and then I want to go to card catalog. Let me see, what did I search for? Oh yeah, Alabama. We're going to search for Alabama probate records. This is an alternate way to get into these. And this should work because I did it today. So I'm going to type in Alabama probate records. Actually, that should be in the keywords. And then I'm going to click search. And then Ancestry has some Lauderdale County courthouse probate records. Not all of them by any stretch of the not by any stretch at all do they have all of them. But you'll see it brings me to this page, Alabama U.S. Wills and Probate Records, 1753 to 1999. Well, go over here to county and then scroll down to Lauderdale, and then it brings up another sidebar, and then each of these records that's green, it represents probate records that they have for Lauderdale County. So any of these record groups that you wanted to search, like if you wanted to search bonds, you could search. You can search them. Now, this is how you do a manual search. You're probably best to just type in a name in the boxes and do a standard search. And even if you're just doing a generic search from the home page, if there are probate records, it ought to pull those up unless you filter them out. I'm going to go back home, and then I'm going to go under U.S. Census Records on the side here and click All. And then I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where we see those census years highlighted in green. What I wanted to point out with this is something I alluded to last week, the non-population census schedules. For example, when they did the population census in 1850, 60, 70, and 80, they also took, well, and actually some of these they started as early as 1820, but they did other censuses as well. They enumerated industries, like everybody that owned a sawmill or a grist mill. They enumerated churches, schools, newspapers. They enumerated insane, idiotic, blind, and deaf people. And I'm sorry, that's their terms. They weren't politically correct with their phraseology. That's what they called them. They enumerated farms. Anybody that had a farm valued at $100 or more got enumerated in a farm agricultural census. So this is the way you access those non-population census schedules. At the bottom, like the U.S. 1880 schedule of defective, dependent, and delinquent classes, the mortality schedules, which are deaths within a census year, only within a census year, but still if you can't find any other kind of death record. If you're African American and you're researching your family, you will definitely want to take a look at the slave censuses, which, as we said last week, only the slave owners are listed by name or supposed to be. One enumerator in like North Carolina in 1850 or 60, I think it was 1860, for every slave in his district wrote down their first and last name, which is great. Wasn't supposed to do it, but I wish they had all done that instead of just doing their sex, race, and age.
How did you get to that slave schedule?
Just under. We clicked on.
Does it have it listed here in this list somewhere?
Yeah, at the bottom, if you go to click on the little sidebar next to census records, right here on the home page, click All, and then scroll down to the very bottom. And they've got the census records listed in alphabetical and chronological order. So just scroll down to, for example, 1850 U.S. Census slave schedules. And it says free because they will let you look at this on their site, on the home page, on the home edition, without making you sign up for a subscription. But they would really rather you buy a subscription. So basically, they've got blanks for first, middle names, last name of slaves, which only in rare cases is that actually ever useful. What you want to do, in this case, I'm going to look for Mary Coffee because I know she had several slaves. So I'm going to type Mary Coffee as the slave owner, and I think she's probably listed as Mary Coffee. And then I'm going to click search down at the bottom. And again, I've left the boxes unchecked just in case. Yeah, and it'll bring up links to every slave in Mary Coffee's census enumeration for 1850. You can just click on one, like the top one, and it will get you there. Unfortunately, if you print this page out for documentation, it's going to print out just the info for this one person than all this stuff down here instead of a summary for all of them. You can see this is how those 1850 and 60 slave censuses appeared in the South, in slaveholding states, which included states like Missouri and Delaware, states that officially were neutral or sided with the Union but had been slave owning before the war. So, and it says Mary Coffey's supposed to be on here, but I don't see her. Sometimes it takes you to a page before.
There was one at the bottom that was spelled with a Y.
Okay, that's probably her then. It's just spelled a different way. Yeah, again, see, I keep talking about spelling variations. Yeah, well, there's Ann Coffey. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time specifically trying to find Mary Coffey, but you can see they just list the slave owner by name, then the sex, race, and age of the slave as if they're Creole, mulatto, whatever. They've got blanks for if a slave has run away from the plantation or just isn't there when they counted them. They might be classed as runaway. Then blanks for the number of slave cabins a slave owner had for his slaves, which is important to have this data. Even if you're a white person researching your white slave-owning ancestor, I like to collect all this data because it's information about my ancestors. I had a few, unfortunately, that were slave owners, and what I would love to do is try to identify who some of their former slaves were. So it's a good idea to get this because it's part of your genealogy documentation. It shows you, if your ancestors listed with 315 slaves, like John Peters, it says they were fairly well-to-do and had a huge plantation. But just some non-population schedule data on there. If anybody has any really quick questions, otherwise I'll turn it over to Jordan.
FamilySearch.org is run by and maintained by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's free for anybody, though. All that you need is to have an email address or a phone number. And if you go to their homepage, you'll notice at the top right corner, which I have a red box around it, that you can create a free account or sign in. So if you already have an account, you'll click sign in. And if you don't have an account already, that's where you'll begin, obviously. You will need, as I say, an email address or a telephone number. And that phone number needs to be to a smartphone. So not a landline, not a flip phone, unfortunately. Whenever I do the demonstration, I use an email account. So I went through that process, letting us know how we do it. You click on.
And they don't proselytize, so they won't try to sign you up for an email.
And as a matter of fact, you really don't receive many notifications from them at all after you set up the service.
From Ancestry.
Out of curiosity, do any of you have a FamilySearch account already? Okay, so a lot of you. Perhaps it will still be edifying for you. I am approaching it as though you walked off the street, had never heard of it before, and we kind of start together from there. So you'll just supply a little basic information about yourself, your name, your birthday, whether you're male or female. And if you are a member of the Latter-day Saints Church, you can click that as well. And then it will want you to create some account information, some login information. You'll need to create a username and a password. And whether or not you want to use a telephone number or an email address as your recovery option in case you forget your credentials. And also the first time you make your account, it will want to confirm that somehow by sending you a link. So you'll have to choose whether you want that to go to a phone number or to an email address. And then your location, and then the last box at the bottom, be sure that you agree to their terms of service, and then create your account. One thing to note here, if your password, if it considers it too weak, it won't let you continue. Now, usually the way to get around this is to add like some punctuation, like an exclamation mark or a question mark. That'll usually do it if the first thing that you put in is not complex enough for its liking. And then it will want you to verify your account. This is basically just to make sure that you're a human being, flesh and blood person, and not a robot trying to hack their software. So it's going to send you a message either to your phone number or your email address, whichever you chose. And so then you go to your email, you'll find that FamilySearch has sent you this complete registration button. So you click complete registration, and it's going to take you back to their website. And voila, you have created your own account. Now here we are at the home screen whenever you sign in for the first time. And I'll just point out some of the headings along the top that they have here. So there's family tree, search, memories, indexing, and activities. For our purposes today, because I'm not diving too deep into all of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of the website, we're going to be talking about family tree and search. But just know if you need to navigate through this website as you go along, this top bar with all these options is always going to be there. So if you need to get back to your family tree, or if you want to search anew, all you have to do is check those buttons. And then on the right-hand side, you'll find information mostly about your profile. So it's going to be a help button, whether you've received any messages. Sometimes you can correspond with some of the other members of FamilySearch and ask them, hey, where did you find this record? Or hey, you're my third cousin twice removed, or whatever you like. If you have a notification, like for example, it says, hey, we found a record that might contain your great-grandmother. Then it will light up a notification by the little bell. And then you'll also see your profile there. And I used my mother, with her permission, as an example to create a new account. So it will be her name there, but it would be your name. So you'll also notice right underneath that where I have the green arrow, it's going to prompt you how to get started. In this case, because it's a brand new account that nobody's ever done anything to before, it's saying recommended tasks, add your father. So you start with the closest generation to you whenever you do genealogy, and that's what we're going to do today. So click Add Father. And so it'll take you to this blank family tree here. You see, it will be you, where it says Monica Collier, my mother, and you'll see the box that stems off of her, and it says Add Father, Add Mother. You don't have to start with your father. You can add your mother, whichever you want to start with. You click the little plus sign, and it will open up this window here that I have in the top right. Now, this is adding the father of the child, Monica Collier. So you'll supply all the information that you have. Now, if you don't know something, if maybe you get back to your grandparents or something and you may not be 100% certain where they were born or what their exact birthday is, you might know it's January, but not January the 29th, for example, no worries. Just put in what you know. So we are going to supply all of the information that we want. Now, my grandfather, my mother's father, is still alive. So I have chosen that he is a living person. You see, you can choose either deceased or living. With living people, because of privacy issues, it's a little bit different interacting with some of those profiles. Basically, you make a profile for a living person and nobody else can see that, the information that you supply. Also for privacy reasons, but you'll notice the little disclaimer there that it gives you about living individuals.
It's easier to research someone who's deceased because
absolutely
the records are generally
you need a private detective really to get someone who's still alive. Of course, but genealogy is interested in people generally who are deceased, so most of the time that's not necessary. Now, some of the information it wants us to supply about our ancestor here. You notice a birthday and a death day. It's a little tricky whenever you use the software because, for example, I typed in Athens, Alabama as his birthplace. It's going to bring up a list of what it calls standard locations. So you could just write in gobbledygook and put it on there, but it doesn't help the software search. So it says, oh, Athens, Alabama, did you mean Athens, Limestone, Alabama, city 1818 to present? Yeah, I did mean that, wonderful. So you click that, and it will actually then populate a place. And you notice here, it has a little pin beside it. So that means that FamilySearch.org recognizes it as a standard place. And you do the same thing with the birthday. Consider it like a search, and then it brings up results, and you click on the results, if any, that are applicable to what you're trying to tell it. So we have supplied all of the information. Whenever you have finished supplying all the information you know, click Next. And it's going to say, hello, you just created this person. Here's all the information you found about him. Now, this person is still living, so it's not going to show me any possible matches of people on the website already. But later on, whenever we create deceased relatives, it may show possible matches for people who have already been created in the system of FamilySearch. We'll encounter that in a moment. But for now, since he's still alive, we just click Create Person. Now, you see him here. He's added to the family tree. The information we supplied is underneath him. So you'll go through the same process with the next parent, if applicable. My grandfather, for example, does not know who his father was. So if he was creating a family tree, he would just put his mother. That's perfectly fine. Again, just focus on what you know. And also to note, for females, always put the maiden name whenever you're creating their profile. That becomes important later on. And so we'll just continue repeating this process, going back generation by generation and individual by individual. Only provide the information that you know, and eventually, hopefully, you'll reach a screen like the one you see here on the top right. Now, this is my great-grandfather. I put in his name and the information that's here in the column on the left. His name is Lester Roden. He was born in Lawrence County, Alabama. Now, whenever I supplied his information and clicked Create Person, it says, aha, we have a person already in our system whose information matches what you supplied. And it wants you to review. Now, there's actually multiple individuals here that it thought might be the person I was trying to create. So you'll want to review through the information and see, is it indeed a match? It may not be. But if it is a match, if you think, yes, this is my ancestor, you click Add Match. Or if you're not quite so sure about it, you can still just click Create Person like we did before. So I'm going to actually click Add Match. Now in this case, this particular ancestor I have was married twice, and that's what it's telling me here on the left. So it wants me to select the couple that I descend from. Is it from his second wife, Tommy, or his first wife, Dorothy? And again, if you're unsure, you can just click Select Person and skip making that connection for now. But I do happen to know that information, and so I clicked Select Couple beside Dorothy. Now, whenever I did that, it's going to take me back to my family tree, and you're going to see that it has now added my great-grandfather, who we were just searching for, and Dorothy, who I just selected as his couple. And you'll notice as well that there's a little arrow beside the box that has their names. Now, what it's doing, these people have already been created by somebody else. I don't have to start from scratch with them. And so whenever I selected, yes, those are my ancestors, it's going to populate all the information that has been supplied heretofore about those people. So if you click on the right arrow, it's going to expand that family tree that's already being created. And I went a little trigger happy with the privacy censorship there. Please forgive me, that might have been a little unnecessary. But so this is all of the information that has been completed up to this point in time by other members of FamilySearch.org with whom you share a family tree somewhere or other in some way. But I will say it's worth it to continue to investigate, as Lee said, check their work, and not just accept it as true at its face value. While the information may be reliable in general, it may be also incorrect in details, or it may be just completely incorrect. You don't know. But this is the work that has been done up until this point in time. And you can still edit, add to, remove information from any of these profiles as you go along. So none of this is set in stone. It's all crowdsourced. A little bit about exploring the family tree. One of the features that I really love is that you can change the way that you look at the family tree, and this fan chart here is really beautiful. I've actually switched over to my personal account now because I filled in the family tree pretty much as far as you can go with it. But you can carry it out like 7 generations. So going back, for example, I think that would be to my 4th or 3rd great-grandparents. Yeah, those are my 4th great-grandparents on the very end. You see, you'll be in the center. If you have any descendants that you mentioned, like if you have children or grandchildren and you add them to the tree, they'll come off the bottom there. And then it fans out radially, going a generation at a time. And I just love the way that it looks. But it gives you a variety of different choices. You can see the drop arrow here. You can go through the different ways that you want to look at the family tree, which are really beautiful. There's a lot of, as I say, nitty-gritty about this that I won't necessarily get to today. Now, if you have questions about it at the end, maybe we can kind of investigate some of those details. But I would like, well, I'll show you this, for example. I found a random person somewhere in my family tree. If you click on their profile, you'll see options on the left side. You can view information about their life, sources that are attached to them, memories that are attached to them. You can also click View My Relationship, and it breaks down a pedigree chart with you. The individual that I selected is all the way over here on the top right. Her name is Iona Victoria Emerson, or they called her Ani apparently. She is my third great-grand aunt, which is a very interesting way of looking at it. This is very useful whenever you get into more complex relationships, like say fourth cousin once removed. It's really hard to visualize what that means, but whenever you see it broken down like this, you think, oh, okay, well, you know, that's the child of my fourth cousin, for example. It visualizes some of those more complex genealogical relationships. Now, I'm going to switch gears and start talking about how you search for records in FamilySearch. A lot of this information kind of touches the same bases that Lee has talked about with Ancestry Library Edition. They're really, complements of one another. If you go, again, that main bar that I talked about on the top left-hand side of the screen, to search, you see there are a variety of different categories that you can search for: the records, images, family tree, genealogies, catalog, etc. For our purposes today, I'm going to talk about searching through records. So I'm going to select records. On the right-hand side here, you see this is the record search engine home screen. And it's a very basic search to begin with. You see just first and last name, a place, and a year. Now, oftentimes, I'll say 9 times out of 10, it's best to start with the general and work your way to the specific, especially if you're just starting out. You kind of want to see what all is available before you start tweaking with certain search criteria, because you can actually click more options, the blue button that's right beside the search button, and you can get rather specific. You can search by if you know they got married in Hardin County, Tennessee in 1840, you can put that criteria in. If you know that their husband's name was John Smith or the wife's name was Jane Doe, you can put in that information and search only for results that meet those criteria. But whenever you do that, you run the risk of perhaps excluding some search results that may be relevant to you that didn't quite meet the stringent criteria that you put forth. So again, it's a good idea to start out just having a very general search to see what all you can find, trolling the bottom of the seafloor, as it were, before you go angling for big fish. Like I say, be careful about being too specific. Sometimes less is more. And when you're ready, click search. So I put in information about my great-grandfather, Otis Gray. I know he was in Lauderdale County, Alabama for his life, and he was born in 1918. So that's the basic information. This is what I know for certain, or with as much certainty as I can. Just add what you know, and it's going to bring me up this search results page. Now I can look through it at a glance and see that most of the information is going to match my ancestor, which is good in this case, because oftentimes you'll find that none of the information is relevant to what you're looking for. But in this case, yes. Note, however, the third one down from the top, it does say Otis Gray. He lived in Alabama, but he's also in Madison County, born in 1922. And you notice it lists other information contained on this record about him. So his mother's name was Clara Gray. His sibling was Willard Gray. So I know that my great-grandfather's mother was not named Clara. I know with relative certainty that he did not live in Madison County, and he was not born in 1922. So I'm going to exclude that as a possibility. Now, fourth down from the top, you'll notice a similar story here, except the father's Jerry Gray, the mother is Ella Gray, and he's got a brother named Almond Carlin Grady. Now, all of that information I do know is true because I've talked to my grandmother. You may not have the luxury of talking to living relatives about that any longer, but this is just to illustrate the fact that just because it brings you a result that matches in some criteria, like Alabama or the name, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the person you're looking for. You just have to use your common sense in some way and investigate if it is or isn't, or might be or might not be. In this case, I have a good degree of certainty that the Otis Gray fourth from the top is my great-grandfather. So, as I said, it gives here a summary of all of the vital information that's contained on the record that came up whenever you searched with your ancestor's name. So it's going to tell you the record type here underneath his name. It's from the United States Census 1930. It tells his birth year, approximate. Now I say approximate because it thinks he's born in 1919. He was, however, born on Christmas Eve 1918. So you might be forgiven for thinking he was born in 1919. He was only a week old by the time the new year turned. But so there's those little details here that you have to be kind of watchful for. It tells the census location. So this was in Green Hill, Lauderdale County, Alabama. And then it also has other individuals who are listed on the same record. And it's going to list also their kinship, so whether they're mother, father, or siblings. Now, as I told you, beware of what I call name doppelgangers. These are people with the exact same name as your ancestor. They may even be living in the same region, the same state, or even in the same county if it's a particularly common name. You just have to be aware of that. And I have gotten into rather frustrating conundrums and messes on FamilySearch with other users of the website who are not so careful about confusing individuals like that. So for example, I've got a fourth great grandfather named John Richard Watkins who has a name doppelganger who lived in Michigan. Now, I have the census information of him living in 1870 in Lauderdale County. It's right there in black and white. But they list the census for 1870 showing him in Michigan as though he was living with 2 different wives, 2 different sets of children in 2 different states at the exact same time. Now, again, you just have to use a whit of common sense with this. But unfortunately, a lot of what you deal with these websites, especially the crowdsourced ones like FamilySearch, is that not everybody out there in the world meets that same stringent level of criteria, or, bless them, the same level of God-given common sense about who it is that we're talking about. You just have to beware of name doppelgangers.
Can you tell me what that little, see there's a family tree and then a camera, what do those do?
Except for you to add
Well,
pictures.
it would show your relationship to that person, or whether or not they have already been integrated into a family tree, not necessarily whether it connects with your own family tree, but where they fit in someone else's family tree that's been made, or if there are any images attached to them. That actually also means that there is an image attached to this record. Now, not all records on FamilySearch have images of the original that you can look at. I like to call those ghosts of images. It will basically be like, there is an archive somewhere that has this bit of information. You can't look at it. Again, as Lee had pointed out in his presentation, sometimes that information is proprietary. Sometimes they don't own the rights to the images, they just own the rights to the fact that it exists. Or perhaps someone hasn't gone through and taken a picture of it, because human beings do actually have to go through and digitize these records. But in this case, it's going to show you that you can view their relationship within a family tree, and that this record does in fact have a picture of the record attached to it. Now, I'm going to click on his name, and that's going to bring up this side window, which is basically just a summary box of everything that it's already told you. His age, the event date, where it's located, and if you scroll down, it's going to have all the individuals listed on the record. Now, for our purposes, we're going to actually go ahead and click View Record, and that's going to take you to this screen on the left. And this should all be ringing the right bells because it's very similar to using the Ancestry software. It's going to have an abstract of the information, which is now the 3rd time that it has shown us. It's going to have an abstract of the information, his race, his relationship to the head of household, where the location is. And notice on the side as well, it's going to have the fact that this record is attached to an individual already. Now, this is very useful for you, especially if you're just starting out and you find, hey, this is my great-great-grandfather on the 1900 census. And it will say, well, this is attached already to a person. So you can click on that individual and see all the other information you may be missing. And if you wish, you can attach that person to your family tree. Now, I'm going to focus on showing you the original document. So you'll actually click underneath the thumbnail image of this census schedule. You'll click View Original Document. And then notice the information at the top of the screen here. I show you on the right-hand side. It tells us that this is the United States Census in Alabama, the County of Lauderdale, the jurisdiction of Green Hill, the enumeration district number 8. You'll also notice directly underneath it that it's image 15 out of 24. So if you wish, you could look at every census schedule for that particular enumeration district in order. Sometimes you have to scroll back and forth between one or two. If your household just happened to be one of the last few and he had 3 blanks left on his page, but there are 8 people in the family, he's going to have to go over to the next page. So it's always worth it, if it's on the very top or on the very bottom, to check the previous or the following census schedule to see if there's any information that may be left off on this particular page. There are 24 images from enumeration district number 8. At the bottom, it's giving you a transcript, an automated generated transcript of every single individual on this page. Now you can collapse that very easily. There's a little arrow pointing down beside image index if you want to view it full screen. Also on the left-hand side, you see a number of different toggles, so you can zoom in or out to look as closely or as far away on the record as you wish. I'm going to draw your attention to the top right-hand corner of this screen that has the option Print, Download, or Tool. Another way that you can search, if you go back to that main search window, instead of doing that general search, as I mentioned, where Lee pointed out as well, it's going to browse through every collection that it has. And it has literally millions of records that it will search through. Now, it'll bring up Otis Grays that live all over the place if you don't specify Alabama, for example. Now, you may be looking for something quite specific. Let's dive in and see the specific collections that they have available through FamilySearch. So this is the main search window homepage. If you scroll down just a bit, you'll see Find a Collection. Now, you can either search for a collection title, or what I do, click Browse All Collections. And because we are very fortunate to live in the state that is first alphabetically in the Union, you'll see Alabama results first. Not as convenient whenever you get to like Tennessee, you have to scroll down really far. But you'll see all the collections that they have for Alabama. Births and christenings, Civil War records, deaths and burials, and you'll see there are different time periods that they encompass. So for example, I see that Alabama county marriages, the latest possible marriage that you could search for is 1957, and then the earliest possible one is 1809, though I'm not quite sure how many extant marriage records there are from 1809. It just means that that's the beginning of when it's possible to search through these records. On the right-hand side, beside the names of the various record collections, you'll see the number of records in each collection. Now, this is relevant because whenever I'm looking for an Alabama county marriage, I want to have my search pool as large as possible. So whenever I see that there are actually 2 Alabama marriages, or let's say 3 actually, Alabama marriages, which I've highlighted in red, one of them has almost 6 million records. The other one has just under 800,000, and the other one has about 6,700. So as I go through looking for Alabama marriages, I'm going to start with the one that has the most records first. And if I don't find it there, I might work my way down to some of the less likely sources. But I'm actually going to click on the name of the collection. It's highlighted in blue. So I'm going to select the record collection that I want to search through. And that's going to bring me to this screen. You see it's the title of the collection, Alabama County Marriages 1809 to 1950. If you wish, and you may want to do this, you could browse through each and every image in the collection. There are 1.2 million of them. Just know you may have that desire. Maybe the search engine isn't bringing up the criteria and you think that it's out there somewhere. You can look through those. They should be more or less arranged by county, possibly chronologically. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But I have found that sometimes it's worth it just to look through it. But that will not be your first course of action. Your first course of action will be to go to the search bar here and type in the names of your ancestors that you're looking for.
Unless you have lots of free time.
And you may very well. I'm not here to judge, but you do have that option if
2
you
million
wish.
images, that's a lot of free time.
Now, and as I pointed out, it's okay to not be too specific. Since I'm already searching only within Alabama marriages, I'm just going to put my great-grandfather's name as my search criteria. So I put Otis Gray, and I click search. And it's going to give me all the records that it thinks might match my criteria. When you find a record result you think may be a match to your ancestor, click anywhere within the highlighted area to open that record. Notice that same right window opens, which gives you an auto-generated summary of the contents on the record. It will also tell you other individuals, if any, that are on the record along with the person that you searched for. And you can still go further in than this in most instances and actually view that record like we did before. So click View Record. And here is a photocopy of that particular record. This is my great-grandfather and great-grandmother's marriage license from 1940. You'll see that record image at the bottom. You see that same summary. You can collapse that if you wish. Okay, yeah, I knew. Let's discuss how to save this document. Okay, great. You found your great-grandparents' marriage record. Congratulations, good work. Now you want to save it. Maybe you want to print it, whatever you want to do with it digitally. So what you're going to want to do, click Download. One thing I'll say here, you could just click Print. If you do that, FamilySearch is going to add a lot of extraneous information that you may not want to be included. Namely, it's going to be that auto-generated list of, hey, here's everyone on the record. It might even split that record between 2 pages, and there's really no way to fix that. So the easiest thing to do, in my experience, is to just download it to the computer or save it to your flash drive. When you download it, you notice it pops up at the bottom here. This is your downloads bar. You'll click the up arrow on the side and say Open. That's all you got to do. And it will bring you to the screen on the right. Now here you can crop the image. You can make it brighter or less bright, whatever you need to do to get it more legible. And from there you can actually print it or save it to a flash drive, whatever it is that you wish to do. Very strangely, and Lee may know the reason for this, if you go back to this original page here, Otis Gray, it'll show that the election precinct 29, Etowah, Alabama. Etowah is like Gadsden. I don't know why it does that, because they did not get married in Gadsden. If you go to the marriage license, you can see that it actually took place in Lauderdale County. But just beware of things like that. The takeaway from that is, even if it's telling you, hey, this is in Etowah, election precinct whatever, it's still worth it to investigate the original record, because including human error, there's also technological error. There's a large margin for that. So trust your own eyes and trust the original document as far as it is that you're able to do so. Okay, now, how would I attach this to a person on my family tree? Because that's what we want to do after all. As you build this family tree, the goal is to use these records that you come across and attach them to that person on your family tree to document your research. That, hey, this isn't just me pulling a name out of a hat or consulting a crystal ball. I am actually doing record research. So we want to attach these records as often as possible to the individuals in our family tree. The way to do that, we're here on the record page. You'll notice at the top right-hand side of the screen is a link to your source box. So you'll click My Source Box first, and this is a record that you want to add as one of your sources of your genealogical research. So you'll click Add to My Source Box. Now, it's going to have a screen that pops up whenever you do that, asking you to provide a little information about it, just a note so you can keep track of what it is that you've found. I just put marriage certificate for Otis Gray and Evelyn Davis. It tells at the top the source title, so this came from Alabama County Marriages 1809 to 1950. And then you'll just click Save whenever you have put in the note that you feel is most appropriate. Now, I'm going to go back to my great-grandfather's page. You'll go to your family tree, click on this individual, and you'll go to his sources. I'm going to click Add Source, and it's going to prompt me. Do I want to add a source from the internet? Do I want to add a memory? Or do I want to attach from my source box? In this instance, I'm going to attach from my source box. That's where I just put the marriage license. So you'll select that option, and it's going to bring you to your source box. This is everything that you've ever added to your source box since you've been a member of FamilySearch. I'm going to little blue check mark to the left-hand side, and I'm going to click Attach on the right-hand side. And it's going to ask me, one good thing about FamilySearch is usually whenever if you take an item away from a person, if you add an item to a person, it wants you to document why you do that. List a reason why you're doing this. It's not imperative, you don't have to, but it's really useful to see, like, I'm attaching this record because it says so-and-so. It's in black and white. This isn't just me taking a guess This isn't just me, as I said, consulting a crystal ball. I have a good reason. Here's my reason, which is very useful whenever you're going through and looking through the family tree and checking other people's work. So you'll just click attach whenever you've provided a sufficient reason. And then voila. It's going to now appear, the Alabama County marriages 1809 to 1950, under the sources for this person, my great-grandfather. And you'll notice some of the information that I provided. Marriage certificate for Otis and Evelyn Davis shows the marriage relationship between Otis Gray and Evelyn Davis in Lauderdale County, 1940. Boom. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now, any person who uses FamilySearch can come along and find my great-grandfather's page, look at the sources, and see, oh, okay, well, he got married in 1940 to Evelyn Davis, and this person provided that. You'll notice as well, it tells the date that this was modified, that it was done, and it also lists my name, my username, so that if someone does something completely wacky, you can click on their profile and send them a message and say, hey, where are you getting this information? I would like to have access to it, or I'm just curious what your reasoning is. So you can actually click on people's profile and interact with them. You'll find a URL to that document so that you can cite it in your research. It provides just everything basic about this record that we just found. So, to review very briefly, this is the methodology that you will use as you go through and create your well-documented family tree. You'll create family members using all available known vital information that you have. That's birth and death dates, where they lived and when, in order to build your family tree. Whenever you create people in the family tree, you'll then search through collections for records containing that person, which establish those facts about a person's life, where they lived and when and where they were born and died, and who were their family members. You can use the records we have encountered so far, like census data, that's usually the most reasonable and most useful, death and marriage certificates, probate court records, and other less common sources, such as we'll encounter newspapers.com later on. You can attach obituaries as well. And then you'll attach those records you find to a person's page to help verify and keep track of the facts that you establish. And also, I can't stress this enough, it's okay to leave something blank whenever it's not known to you. Just focus on what you can prove, what you can find out, what you do know. And using this method, you go back one generation at a time. And with any luck, you'll reach an ancestor who is already documented, and that's great. By connecting your family tree to them, it will fill in the tree after them that has been supplied already by FamilySearch users. But again, beware. If you take anything away from this, I'm sure Lee would agree, beware. This is crowdsourced. Anybody off the street, anybody on God's green earth can come along and say ultimately anything they wish. They do not have to provide documentation. They can say anything they like about anyone they like. We know better. We rely on documentation to do good genealogy, but everyone out there in the world can't be counted on to do the same. And I provided an example here from my family tree. My grandfather's grandfather, my second great-grandfather, Charlie Wilson Collier, nobody knows his father. It's not in a record anywhere. His mother is living with her mother as far back as the 1860 census. There's never a male in the household. Her mother, Eliza Collier, was the head of household. So someone out there in La La Land has come along and decided that the father of Charlie Collier was named James Collier. Now his name may well have been James, but there cannot be a document that shows that. There just isn't. And I highly doubt that the person had the surname Collier because Martha Collier lived in the household of Eliza Collier. That's her maiden name. I highly doubt that the real father of Charlie Wilson had the surname Collier. Again, it's possible, but you will notice that there are 0 attached sources to this person. They do not list a birthday, they do not list a death day, only that he's deceased. So whoever created this person, they may have had a seance and talked to Martha Collier. Who was the father of Charlie? I don't know. But they certainly didn't get it from any available source record document, because if they did, they would have attached that information, or they should have attached that information. And until they attach that information, I have to just discredit that altogether. There are obviously lots of other specific features that you can dive into as you explore FamilySearch.org that we just don't have time to discuss today. As you go through this website, becoming more comfortable with it, you can examine and encounter some of those features. Like I mentioned, messaging other users. You can create family groups for yourself and your cousins and your children. You could add portraits for yourself and your ancestors. Don't be afraid to explore and learn by trial and error. That's how I learned all of the things that I presented today, is just by playing around with it. There's really no way that you're going to so hopelessly mess up that everything's just ruined and there's no going back from it. No, you won't get to that point. The most important things to remember, we're going to drill in your head. Let source documents guide you. Interpret those documents with common sense, and then look closely like a detective to find all the clues contained in a document to establish a fact. We are only interested here in the verifiable truth, whatever it may be. It's okay not to know. It's not a failure or a weakness to admit that you don't know when or where someone was born or died. It just means you need more information.
It's okay to speculate as long as you say you're speculating.
Sure. There may not be any information left. If you go back far enough, there may not be a document anymore. There may have been a fire at a building in Washington, D.C. in 1890, and now there's no way to prove half of the population existing at that time. Someone's burial place may be completely lost or passed out of living memory. This just means that there's always a challenge remaining. The puzzle is never 100% solved with genealogy, and in my opinion, that's the fun of it. So that's the biggest takeaway for you. I suppose I can leave you with: just have fun.